All this week, I've been on the ledge about BC and UConn, giving you all the reasons why you should be on upset alert, why we should be worried about UConn. The show we'll be joined by Mitch Wolfe, who will hopefully get me off that ledge and tell us why BC is going to win this game. All this and more on today's Locked On College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Locked On BC, AJ Black. I'm the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Sports Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. All right. This has felt kind of like a bye week for a lot. It's just like there's no buzz about this game at all. I mean, there hasn't been buzz about BC in a couple of weeks, but even less so because it's heading off to East Hartford, the vaunted UConn Huskies. And all week long, I've been saying, watch out for this. This could be a trap game for BC. And I hate using trap game because they're just bad. Both teams are bad. But on today's show, I got Mitch. Mitch, how's it going?
Doing all right. I'm not sure I'll actually be able to watch this game live because I'll be traveling for work. But hopefully I won't have to go back and rewatch it and be sad.
So this UConn team, you look at the statistics, it's not that far off from BC in terms of everything except for passing yards. And running yards, obviously, UConn has a huge advantage because that's what they can do. They can run the ball. Mitch, what are your thoughts? Let's just start talking about BC's offense. Do you think this will be one of those games that BC's offense will actually, sputter and spurt here and there, but actually be able to kind of move?
I mean, it kind of has to be at this point. I mean, UConn's defense it's not great. It's not good. But I mean, even BC's still operating, even with a decimated offensive line, they're still operating with significant talent advantage, maybe everywhere except the offensive line. So I have to imagine that they'll play better. I mean, looking at UConn's roster and, kind of who they've been playing, I'm not overwhelmingly impressed by anybody on this team, especially on the defense. So, in terms of looking at their schedule, they have 3 wins, which, it's a lot more than most people expected. But if you look at those wins, one is against an FCS team. The other is a home game against Fresno State, who had to come cross country and was missing Jake Haener, their quarterback, who is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And then they beat an FIU team, who's also one of the worst teams in college football. They got blown out by Syracuse, Michigan, and NC State. So, you kind of have to find a middle ground there with BC. I think obviously they're not as good as Michigan. They're probably not as good as Syracuse or NC State. We'll find out later in the season. But I would say that they're better than some of the teams that UConn has beaten. So I feel decently as comfortable as one can be with BC this season. That's how I feel about the Eagles going in this game.
So you don't have the jitters yet? Like I have that palpable feeling like, I remember what happened. It seems like every year under Hafley, he's had a too close for comfort win. 2020 was Texas State, which they almost won. They had UMass last year, who hung around way too long because of Djokovic's injury. And maybe it was Maine this year, but I also got this game kind of circled, and I'm a little worried because it's homecoming for UConn. It's, the UConn fans always get themselves pumped up for this game. I don't know. I hope BC's, as you said, their advantage in talent will be too much.
I mean, I think that if BC was honestly, if they were having a better season, I'd be more concerned. You mentioned this being a trap game. I think, especially if they're, looking ahead next week to a home game. I know Duke is better than many people expected, but, they might be looking forward to a short week, home game, night game. But, with the way BC's season has gone, they're coming off an absolute drubbing on the road to Wake Forest. This is a road game, but it's, it's not, you have to travel extremely far, take a bus down there on Saturday morning, probably. So, I think BC is getting focused because they know this is, one of the few opportunities they have left in the season where they can really get a win where they can, I think feel confident going out of it. You mentioned the Maine game. they beat them by a few scores, but I think anybody who watched the game, and I imagine the players felt the same way, that they didn't feel super confident leaving that game because they didn't really dominate an FCS opponent throughout the whole game. Louisville game, it was close, and I think the maybe the emotions were high in that. They felt good getting back in the win column, but obviously they didn't dominate Louisville by any stretch of the imagination. So, this is a game where BC has to get, they feel like we can get right with this opponent. We're not going to take them lightly because we're not that good so far, but if we play our game the right way, if we, go out there and execute, then we should be able to beat this team by a sizable margin.
So now let's look at the offense and talk about the offensive line. That's obviously going to be a big deal going into this game. Do you think the offensive line should get enough push to prevent the Pat Garrow getting hit 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage over and over again?
I think that'll have to be the thing to watch, because if BC can't run the ball again, then it's going to go back to being the Phil Dracovic show, which there are times when that's cool and there are times when it's catastrophic for the offense. And looking at this team in terms of looking at UConn, that is, in terms of how they are stopping the run, I think they're decent, but I don't think they're they're not Georgia or anything. So I think BC again has a chance to, kind of lean on the run game here. I said that going into the Wake game, and unfortunately that didn't really go anywhere because of the offensive line injuries. But UConn's allowing 156 yards on the ground per game, which is 84th in the country. So, below average, but not terrible. Looking at their schedule, Michigan is obviously going to run the ball a lot. Syracuse, same thing. Florida State's more of a passing offense. So, it's not like they've faced any outlier opponents. They played 8 games so far, so you've got a pretty decent sample size. Excuse me. So, I think that, I imagine that we're obviously not going to have Finn Durstein. We're probably not going to have Drew Kendall again. We'll have to see what goes on there. But, I think that, again, can't imagine they look much worse than they did last week, although I've said that a few times, and then they managed to find a way throughout this season. But I think I'm hoping to at least see, them make a few less mistakes, get some better push in the ground game. And, that'll open up some holes for the running backs. In terms of UConn's defense, they're a very multiple defense. They run a lot of different kinds of stuff in terms of formations, personnel groupings, and all that. So I think this is going to I think you're going to have to kind of probe the defense a little bit to see how they react to things. I know Halfley's talked about that's how he likes to script the openings of games, or at least him and McNulty like to do that. So I think you're going to kind of want to probe to see where the weak spot is in the UConn defense. And then once you figure it out, then you want to keep going after it until they figure out a way to stop you.
So did you say that you think that Kendall's out?
I don't know. I have no information.
Yeah.
I'm with the way Jeff Halfley talks about injuries, I think that unless he is saying the guy's going to play or he's very confident he's going to play, I'm going to kind of assume he's out.
Right. So, I think there's a bunch of guys too, as we look into this, and this is not making excuses, just guys that if impact how the offense works, that is worth watching. That, and of course, Drew Kendall's one of them. Alex Broom is another one. He played only, I think, 7 snaps last week.
Mm-hmm.
Only had a limited role in that offense, and we've seen him be a great pass blocker. And then George Takis, who Halfley said on Tuesday was noticeably hobbling on, but just kept gritting it out. And he played.
And it was clear he was not healthy against Wake Forest. He was rotated out a lot for Jeremiah Franklin. They used a lot of 6 offensive lineman sets. So, I kind of almost wish they hadn't tried to rush him back against Wake and let him get healthy for this game where they could kind of ease him back. But I'm now thinking it might even just not worth playing him in this game. And then, next week it's a short week at home. So maybe, have him rest up this week and then get ready for Duke next week.
All right. In a moment, I want to look at UConn's offense, an offense that has a specific strong suit, but is not as strong in another place. We'll get to that in just a moment. Now let's talk about our friends over at Underdog. Underdog is the place to go for your daily fantasy. If you are going over there, some of the daily bets, they have everything. So you pick a game, it'll have, BC and UConn. If you're in a state that allows gambling, you can go and make the over under pick. You pick a bunch of different players, whether it's Phil Dracovic and 220 yards, Pat Garrow more than 20 maybe, I don't know. And you can make a variety of picks, and if you win all the cash. It's a great deal. It's a lot of fun. I love playing with Underdog. You can do it for NFL and college sports. It's easy and available in over 30 states. Pick between 2 and 5 players, and they will finish higher or lower than. It's so easy. Anyone can pick it up and play. And best part, if you sign up right now with the promo code Locked On, Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Again, deposit $100, you're going to get a free $100 right on top of that. That's a win right there. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store, Google Play Store. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On, one word. Get into college football pick'em action today. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here, and I am joined by Eagle Insider staff writer Mitch Wolfe. We're talking about UConn football and a team that went 1-11 last year. They are now 3-4 this year, and they got a new head coach, Jim Mora Jr., and they've got an offense that really cannot throw the ball. I think I wrote it on our site. I think their starting quarterback has thrown for about 740 yards all year. But they've got a strong running game. And this will be interesting because BC's played balanced offenses. They've played teams that can just basically pass the ball. They've had some, other teams. And then you have teams like this in Rutgers. Rutgers was another team that was basically just run the ball. Is there any concern that UConn, who can run it, is going to push around BC's defense?
So I'm writing about this in my defensive rewatch, the Wake Forest game, and that BC's run defense has taken massive steps forward since week 1 against Rutgers, and even made improvements since the loss to Florida State. Against Wake Forest, they allowed the second fewest rushing yards of the season in terms of a total team game, and it was the lowest against an FBS opponent because they only allowed Maine to get 89 rushing yards. So, a very improved performance. Wake couldn't. The longest run Wake had came on the second to last play of the game in garbage time, and that accounted for nearly a quarter of Wake's rushing yards. So on a down-to-down basis, BC did a really good job of stopping the run, and that's because the players are being a lot more aggressive at the point of attack. They're shedding blocks better. They're being more disciplined in their gaps. So, I'll say this: UConn does have some decent offensive linemen. They've got this guard, Christian Haynes, who's he's their starting right guard. He's a good player. He might be playing on Sundays in the future. The rest of from left to right, their offensive line is decently solid, actually. They've got a bit of a weakness at right tackle, so it'll be interesting to see how BC tries to exploit that. But their interior is pretty solid, so I'll give them that. But I think BC will be able to stop the run here, and if you're forcing UConn to be one-dimensional as a passing team, if you're stopping the run, they're not going to really be able to do anything on offense. And I think we can still expect Elijah Jones to either miss or not be in a starting role in this game, or play the whole game. Probably same with CJ Burton. You're going to see Josh DeBerry and Amari Jackson starting outside corner, and then Jason Maitre probably in the slot. And given Wake's receivers and their quarterbacks, I think that alignment of secondary players should be, do a pretty decent job of limiting Wake's or UConn's passing attack.
And I think I saw Andy Backstrom tweet this out earlier this week. Turnovers have not been kind to BC, and you've mentioned this before. Like the fumble luck has been really poor, but BC's offense has not done them any favors either. And they've had a series of turnovers, but they've had, I believe 0 points off of turnovers this year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see BC is UConn a mistake prone team, or is this a team that could be a little bit challenging there?
I'm going to have to check that out on my stat sheet.
Well, while you're doing that, Mitch, I'm going to tell the people here that if you are a fan of our podcast and you're looking a way to support us, please go to youtube.com and find Locked On BC and hit that subscribe button. Again, go to youtube.com/Locked On Boston College and find our podcast and hit subscribe today. Thank you. All right, Mitch. Sorry, just giving you a chance.
So UConn's current turnover margin is -2. They've had, trying to look at the stat sheet here, 11 turnovers gained and 13 turnovers lost. So, their defense is doing a decent job at creating turnovers. Their offense has had some issues with turning the ball over. They lost 9 fumbles, which that's a lot. That they've kind of been also not been helped by the fumble luck there. I think BC, last I checked, was -5. It might be -6 now. There we go. No, -4 actually. So it improved by 1 for all that matters. So, they're both not really great at holding onto the ball. BC has 7 turnovers gained and 11 turnovers lost. So they're actually better at holding on to the ball. Well, this also could be impacted by the fact that UConn has played 1 more game than BC. They played 8 games. BC's only played 7. But BC's only been able to create 5 turnovers, 5 interceptions, and 2 fumble recoveries. And I think one of those was against Maine, where they forced a fumble on 4th down, so it didn't really matter. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard for turnover luck to just, turn at one point. You kind of are just kind of waiting for it to regress back to, maybe helping BC out. Ideally, if they can force Wake to, God, I've been writing this article about Wake, so that's why I keep saying it. But if they can force UConn to be more one-dimensional in passing the ball, which is something they're not incredibly efficient at, maybe they can create some turnovers that way, and then ideally give the offense some better field position that they should be able to take advantage of.
So let's get to prediction time, because I'm, it's episode 4 or 5 of this week talking about UConn, and I'm already tired of talking about UConn. And I can't wait to do the review of this game and then never talk about UConn again until next year. But let's get your prediction here, Mitch. The spread is 7, I think, right now, 7.5. Are you thinking BC by 1 touchdown, more or less? Where are we going?
That's pretty disappointing, considering I think it opened at like 9 or 10. So maybe someone betting UConn so much that it's gone down to 7. I'm going to check it out now just to see. It's BC -7.5. Yeah, I'm going to take BC here. I think they get this done in pretty convincing fashion. Over-under's 44. So I'll say that BC wins this game 34-17. Kind of similar to the main game where, maybe UConn puts together some drives, but I think BC has enough of a talent advantage that they'll be able to win this game by a comfortable margin, and then, kind of use this as a springboard to ideally, get some wins in the back half of the season.
Yeah, I know the injuries are a factor and the offensive line has been bad, but I think there's a lot of recency bias when you look at the spread and you look at how people are feeling about this game. And you really got to put in perspective that BC just lost to the number 5 and number 10 team in the country. And,
also consider people like Wake is 10, and Wake, it's kind of like Wake's 1 loss was to Clemson in double overtime in a game that,
Yep.
Once you get to that point, it's essentially a coin flip. So that's one of the best losses in the country that I don't think enough people are talking about. And aside from that game, and Wake struggled a little bit against Liberty early in the season in kind of a fluke game. But other than that, they've pretty much demolished any opponent they've come up against.
Yeah, so you played against 2 really good teams and a defense that you were poorly positioned against, and a buzzsaw offense. And I think, this could have tones of UMass from last year, but I still do think BC's going to cover this. And you said 34-17?
Yep.
I'm going to go with 38-13. And I'm going to go with BC winning this one pretty handily. I think BC's defense, is going to stand out really strongly here. And I'm going to predict that they're going to put the offense in better positions in some of these games where, they don't have DJ and Sam Hartman pushing down the field. They'll be able to get off the field and get that offense going. And I do think if BC's offense starts clicking, it'll get some points. We saw it against Louisville, what they do when they started moving. And so I still think that could happen, Kendall or not. I'd feel really confident about this if Kendall came back and they could just move Ness over to where Thomas is at and just have Ness, Kendall, Trapillo, and Alec, and then the other guy. And
he shall not be named.
Yes, future Husky. But I'm gonna get killed. But so I'm gonna go with 38-13, and I've learned absolutely nothing about it this year. And I've started to track my predictions both for the Patriots and BC, and I don't do it every week for the Patriots on another site. I'll tell you guys about some other time. And I'm 9-3 right now, so I'm feeling pretty good about my pick here, but we'll have to wait and see. And speaking of making those power moves, we're going to be back in just a moment to look at the other games around the I almost said the NFL, around college football. It's been a long week, hasn't it been, Mitch?
Oh yeah.
And we're gonna look at some of the other games, get Mitch's perspective on it, and talk about some of those other bets that you could be making. If you have not done so already, hit us up in the comment section with your prediction. Make those picks down below. We'll be reading them off by the end of the show. This is Locked On BC, your first listen every day. And if you like our show, please kick a listen to Locked On ACC. As we get closer to college basketball, there's some great hosts on there that are going to talk about the BC Eagles, talk about all the other games that are going on in college basketball. It's hosted by the great Candace Coop. I'm on there on Wednesdays to talk football. You're going to really enjoy that. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. All right, Mitch, let's look at some of these games. And I screwed up talking to you earlier, and we 3 games to make picks on, but we're just going to kind of go down the top 25 because there's some interesting matchups. And the first game that I'm interested in is Ohio State and Penn State. It's at College Park. University Park at Beaver Stadium. What are you thinking about for this game?
Ohio State is, if not the best team in the country, they are a top 2 team in the country. They're favored by essentially 2 touchdowns in this game. Penn State's offense is anemic at best, and I think Ohio State continues to, just absolutely wipe the floor with their opponents. I think Ohio State covers. I think that the over is 60.5. I would say over because I think Ohio State probably puts up near 50 points, and then Penn State maybe will score some early touchdowns. Ohio State will adjust, and maybe Penn State puts in a garbage time touchdown to hit the over. But Ohio State wins this one comfortably, even though it's on the road at Penn State.
Yeah, after watching Penn State get clobbered by Michigan, who is a good team, but not. And
I would say Ohio State's better than Michigan. So
yeah, I'm a little, but they got home field advantage. I do not buy into Penn State yet as a true playoff contender. I think they're going to lose.
For all their warts, Iowa still has a good defense, and Ohio State covered the over in that game by themselves. So yeah, Ohio State wins this one comfortably.
All right, we're going to look at matchups between 2 top 25 teams, but one that it does not have a top 25 team, and I want to bring that up, is not top 25 Notre Dame against top 25 Syracuse. 2.5 point spread for Syracuse. Will Notre Dame get their first big win of the season?
I don't think so. I think that now that Syracuse had that tough loss against Clemson on the road, I think this will be kind of a get right spot for them. It's in the dome, whatever it's called now. It's not the Carrier Dome anymore. Notre Dame has a good defense. They've got players, but their offense is very inconsistent. They have Michael Mayer, but a good tight end can only do so much for you. I think Syracuse wins this one close. I wouldn't bet the spread here. It's Syracuse -2.5. So that field goal. I wouldn't bet on this game, but I would take Syracuse to win in this one.
I am too. I saw a troubling stat about the diversity of Notre Dame's offense and their passing attack, and it was like Michael Myers had 35 catches, and then all the other wide receivers had 32. And so, given that, the fact that they're so heavy on him and that Syracuse has such a good secondary, I think they're going to be able to really confuse Drew Pine in that Notre Dame offense. And I think Syracuse is going to get another big win for them, and they're going to continue rolling, which is crazy. I continue watching them do this, and I'm just
I just want to bring up in a similar fashion. If we look at BC and Zay Flowers, he has 80 targets. The next 3 receivers get you to 69 targets. So it's a similar offense.
We're right there with them.
Yeah.
So basically, when BC plays Syracuse, they're going to stick Garrett Williams on Zay and then say good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, continuing down. Oklahoma State and Kansas State. I don't know much about either of these 2 teams. I'm not into. I usually just don't ever watch Big 12 football unless it's the Red River game, and that's going to be going away soon. Tell me about this game, Mitch. It's a 1.5 point spread for Kansas State.
Yeah, Big 12 football is fun this year. Oklahoma is terrible, so people have kind of gotten off that bandwagon. Texas is inconsistent. Oklahoma State's doing pretty well. TCU's still undefeated. This game is at Kansas State. That's probably why they're favored by only 1.5 points. The problem, so some fun quarterback things about Kansas State. So their starting quarterback is Adrian Martinez, who was at Nebraska forever. Now he's at Kansas State, but he is injured, so he might not play. And Kansas State's offensive coordinator is Colin Klein, who was Kansas State's former quarterback and was a Heisman finalist now a while ago. But fun little thing there. Oklahoma State has been really consistent for what seems like ever. They're pretty much always in the mix with Gundy as their head coach. I feel like regardless of who Kansas State's quarterback is, I feel like Oklahoma State wins this one. They lost their defense coordinator, but they're still playing, decent defense. Their offense kind of found a nice balance between being a true air raid and being the run heavy team they were last year. Spencer Sanders is playing really well. He's been there forever too. So I take Oklahoma State here. The over under is 56. That's a tough one because I feel like both teams could get into the 30s. So I'd probably take the over here, and also just taking the over in a Big 12 game is more fun.
All right, we have time for 2 more picks. So let's go with Kentucky and Tennessee. Kentucky is a 12.5 point underdog here against Hendon Hooker in that really good looking Tennessee team.
Yeah, this is a fun game, and this is a big rivalry in the SEC. So
the beer barrel, I heard.
Sorry,
did you see that? Back in the 70s, they had a trophy for this called the beer barrel.
Oh, I do remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yep.
Cancel culture run amok. Anyways,
yep.
I feel like Tennessee wins this one. I do like Kentucky. They've got a good program. Will Levis is a good quarterback. Kind of an upgraded Phil Dracovic, if you will. But I think Tennessee just has too much talent across the board. Even though everyone talks about their offense, their defense is still quite solid. Kentucky doesn't really have the offensive weapons they've had in the past. Chris Rodriguez has been in and out of the lineup a little bit. Tavian Robinson, Virginia Tech transfer, is a good player, but he's not Wan'Dale Robinson. Their offensive line has been a bit in flux. I think Tennessee wins this one. I'll say Kentucky covers, though. 12 points is a lot, even though Kentucky's on the road. So I would say Tennessee win, but Kentucky cover.
All right, we have time for one more, and I'll give you a choice. Either do Florida and Georgia or Pitt and UConn. Not UConn, yeah. Pitt and UNC.
Let's do Pitt UNC because, we all know how Florida Georgia is going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pitt UNC is fun. It was a really fun last year in the pouring rain. You had Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell duking it out in an absolute monsoon. I think the game went to overtime. Might not be as fun this year. Pitt's offense is, led by our favorite coordinator, Frank Cignetti, and Pat Narduzzi's happy because his team isn't throwing the ball anymore. Keaton Slovis is their quarterback now, and he's been up and down. They've got a really good running back in Israel Abanikanda, who broke Tony Dorsett's single game rushing record a few weeks ago. So he's a really good player. UNC still doesn't really play defense, but Drake May is a really good young quarterback. That offense is explosive as ever. I think is this a home game for UNC? Yes, it is.
Yep.
UNC is only favored by 3. That's kind of surprising. I think UNC wins this one. I think the home field advantage will help them. Pitt's offense is just not, even though UNC's defense is awful, just Pitt's offense and the way that they are philosophically structured, just not built to keep pace with UNC in this game.
Sounds like old BC teams, but with Cignetti at the helm elsewhere, it's not that hard of a stretch to understand that. So, Mitch, where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Tomorrow we'll be having the defensive rewatch of the BC Wake Forest game, and I'll try to give it a bit of a positive spin because I know this sounds weird given that Wake scored 43 points, but I thought there were points where BC's defense actually played pretty well, and they really made Wake work for their scores. It wasn't just these huge explosive plays that you see happen with Wake all the time. Every drive they had to go down the field and, make some really tough plays. So, I was impressed by their performance as much as you could be in a game where you give up 43 points, but that'll be coming out in tomorrow. And then, once the UConn game happens, we'll recap it as we see fit.
And yes, this is AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJ Black _BC. We had a comment here. It's been a quiet night because BC fans are just not into it right now. So Nick says, I stay by my earlier prediction, BC 37-13, Dracovic 300 plus yards as he'll have some kind of time to throw. You can follow me on at AJ Black _BC. And on our site tomorrow, I've got some really exciting new NIL developments for Boston College football. You're not going to want to miss that. I'll have all the details there. And next week, I will have, hopefully at some point, some of these guys that are going to talk about this on our podcast. So keep your ears open. This is exciting news about the future of NIL at Boston College, and we're going to have it exclusively at Eagle Insider. So head over to Eagle Insider today and make sure you sign up. This is AJ Black. Thank you all for following. We'll see you again soon. Go Eagles.